Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, please click on like and subscribe. If you've been here before, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to make some homemade Lincoln logs. Now, making the logs themselves are the easy part. Making the gables, that's going to take longer than anything to learn how to make the gables. I've got mine set up to run on a CNC machine, but I'm going to show you how to make them by hand or how I did my first ones. You'll also notice through here my plans. I've got them drawn out here. If you want the measurements, get them off of this piece right here. The pieces as we're going through the video you'll see me showing are just kind of as I was building them. So we're going to make most of our pieces out of this 4-slotted log. By taking the 4-slotted log, we can cut it down into 3s and get a 1 off the end of it. We can cut them in half and make 2s, etc. So we're going to work on making 4s. Now you'll notice I'm using walnut. I got in some walnut the other day and it wasn't the most pristine walnut that I've ever got. You can make these out of pine. It's a whole lot cheaper. A lot of people use pine. You could use 2x4 material or anything like that. The only thing when you do that is you have to stain it, and then depending on who you're giving it to, then you've got toxic stuff in your wood. Again, this wood's expensive, but as you'll see when I start to cut it, it's warped, it's bent up. It's not going to do me any good to make any furniture with, so I figured I'd make something nice out of it. If you do give them to children, besides the fact that they're small pieces and they could get choked on them, they could chew on them or whatever, and it's not going to hurt them because it's just walnut wood. Now I left this little bind in here to show you how to get past this if you're having this problem. It's kind of like a little video in a video. If your wood's warped like mine is, chances are your saw blade will grab like it just did, so I'm being careful anyhow watching it. And I made 2 cuts here to get the piece done. You can see it drop down as it finished. I'll show you how to make a cut without causing that bind on the next piece I cut here. The first thing I want to do is flush out this end again because it's hard to see on there, but you can tell where the saw was bound up there. So I want to get a nice clean edge on here first of all so my piece is straight. So I'm just nipping that off. I'm going to measure out my next piece. And when I get ready to cut it, I'm going to draw the saw blade across it a couple times before I cut all the way through. As you can see there, it's definitely warped. It's going to bind if I don't do this. So when I'm going to make this cut, I'm going to cut real lightly. I'm not going to cut all the way through. I'm just going to cut through a little bit, back it across, cut a little deeper, and then go through the rest of the way. That should keep your board from binding up when you're cutting it if it's warped. Now my logs will be 10.5 inches long. I'm going to make these boards I'm cutting now 11 inches. They have to be planed down to 3/4 of an inch thick. So I want to make sure when I do this, I don't actually nip the tip off of it when I run it through the planer or have any problems since the board is warped. I want to leave myself a little bit extra to cut off at the end once I get them planed. And if this is the first time you're doing this, I would also suggest making an extra piece of wood just so you can have a test piece to make your cuts on the first time. That way you don't cut into a piece and not have the cuts you want or the distance you want. Or if you're going to use a good hardwood like I am, maybe use a piece of pine just for testing. So now I have my pieces planed down. I'm going to go ahead and cut it to 10.5 inches. I had good smooth sides on both sides, so if for some reason you had a rough side on one, nip a little bit off of it, make a nice clean edge. That's why you have that extra 1/2 inch, and then run you a nice square piece down for your 10.5 inches. The step after this will be going over to our router. And you can do this on a table saw if you've got a dado stack. You can set up a 3/4 inch dado and do this. I find it easier to do it on my router. I've already got a 4-piece cut from a set I've already done. It's really nice if you've already got this 4-piece done because you can basically do all your measurements from this 1 piece. But the first time you go to set it up, you're going to have to set your router up correctly. You're going to want 3/8 of an inch off of the back fence. You want 3/16 of an inch deep on your cut. And again, that's a 3/4 inch clean out bit. Once you have your router set up or your table saw, again, either one, go ahead and run this through on both sides. Make sure you're facing the right direction. You want your logs to go the length of the grain, not against the grain. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this 3/4 inch deep slot out this way. I'm going to flip it over, cut it again. Then I'm going to rotate the board 180 degrees and cut the other side. We'll cut the 2 middle slots here in just a second. So we want our slots 3 inches on center to each other. So from the middle of the slot to the middle of the slot, 3 inches apart. So we're going to set up our dado, or again, set up our router table with a fence on it, and that way we can push through the 2 center pieces. Again, we're going to do the same thing. Once you get your depth set and your width set, we're going to run the board across once, flip it over, do it again, 180, and do the other side of it. And that'll give us 4 slots in our boards. And again, this should be 3 inches from center of the first slot you've already got. You can also measure from that first lip at the top there, 3 inches down to where the next piece starts. Either way, 3 inches centered, 3/16 inch deep. And that log I've got is actually, again, really good to double check all your pieces. This is where your spare piece comes in handy also. Run all your pieces through on your spare piece, and if you have to make any adjustments, you can make any minor adjustments you need to before you run all your good pieces through there. Now I've got my fence clamp down to where I want it. I'm going to go ahead and push the rest of my boards through. Push it through one way, flip it over, push it through again, 180 degrees, push it through both sides, and you should have 4 grooves at the end of it. Once all your pieces are cut, we're ready to go to the table saw. And we want to make this 11/16 of an inch thick. So we're going to cut these planks out into 11/16 inch planks. The reason for that, instead of doing 3/4, we want to have a little bit of play for them to lock into each other. If you do 3/4, 3/4, they're going to fit perfectly tight. If you were making a box or something like that, that would be great. But since you're making something that needs to come apart and go back together, you need to be a little bit under that. That doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to be as close as you can, and you're going to make them all the same distance anyhow. So cut 2 of them off there. Try to fit them together. If they're too loose, you can make an adjustment with your saw blade now. If they're too tight, make the correct adjustment. So we're going to end up with a whole box full of 4 slotted planks here. We're going to head back over to the router, and we're going to round all these off now. So be careful when you round these over. There are small pieces. Make sure you use a push stick if you need one, depending on your router setup and how well you like your fingers. And you want to make sure you push these through one direction. Make sure your slots are to the top. So you're going to push it through with the slots to the top, then you're going to rotate it 180 degrees like that, run it through again, flip it, and run it through the same thing again, 180 degrees. Now by doing that, you'll keep it consistent and they'll be rounded over on the edges. That also gives you more flat spot to control your board better when you're pushing them through. And I'll show you how I push these through a couple different angles. That way you can see what I'm doing. If I tighten my fence up, it might help a little bit. So I'm pushing them through that way. Again, I want to 180 it, so I'm flipping it towards me. Push it through again. Take it, flip it over 360 degrees. Or fence adjustment. Push it through, and it's hard to see from that angle, but you've still got some square stock on the bottom, so it keeps it from rolling out of your hand. And push it through the last time. And that should be it. That should be your 4 slotted piece ready to go. Besides sanding, of course. So this is just another angle showing you what I just did. Doesn't need a lot of explanation. Push it through, watch your fingertips. Once it gets to the point where your fingers are going to get in the way, use a push stick or whatever you feel comfortable with pushing through. Again, if you're real careful, if you don't mind your fingertips being nipped off, just use your fingers and push it the rest of the way across, but I wouldn't suggest that. Just like that, finished. So it's time to start chopping these up into smaller pieces. So we've got our 3 slots are going to be 7.5 inches, our 2 slots are going to be 4.5 inches, and our single slot will be 1.5 inches. There will also be a 3/8 inch piece at the end of them to make them all consistent. Depending on how big of a set you want to make, you're going to have to add up and do your math. Basically take 3/4 of an inch and add up how many pieces you want to make out of your set and figure out what you need. Since I'm batching these out, it didn't really matter. I'm making a ton of them. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our 4 slot and we're going to make singles out of it. By doing this, that'll give us room to make 3s out of it. And then we're going to take the 4s and we're going to split them in half and make 2s out of that. So we end up getting our 1s and 3s out of this, our 2s out of a full section cut in half. Now you will have a small piece left over when you do the 3, and you'll have a small piece left over when you do the 2s. I'll show you those at the end. Basically, you can sell them with the kit, make little fence posts or something like that. Or you can toss them or make another project out of them, depending on what you want to do with them. But there will be some leftover pieces of wood. So once I got my sled set up here, set it up on a sled. You can use a miter gauge or a sliding miter gauge if you want to push these through. I find it easier to do on a table saw. Basically, cut the first piece off with 3/8 of an inch left over on it, like I did there. If it makes it easier for you, if you're going to do multiples like I'm doing here, you can take a 3/4 inch slot, stick it in here, and you can hold that to keep your pieces from moving on you while you're pushing them through. And basically push through however many 1 pieces you want. If you want 20, do 20 4s, cut off the 1s. If you want 30, 40, 50, I think there's 40 or 50 in a normal set. So it's a lot more than you would think, but they go quickly once you're building. Now that my 1s are done, we're going to go to the 3s. Again, I've got a 3-piece here, so I'm checking it, but just so you can see, 7.5 inches is what we want from our fence to our stop. So we're going to push these through, and when we push these through, we're going to have a little nub left over. Again, it's going to look like a little fence post, basically. So you can either make fence post, give it to whoever you're giving the set to, sell it however you're going to do it, or there's probably a ton of other projects that would use this little tiny piece of wood, especially if you're doing miniatures of some sort. Just like everything else, before you cut them all, make sure you run one through and make sure your measurements right. It's a whole lot easier to fix it now than it is after you cut them all off and realize that you've messed them all up. So cut one piece, check your measurements, make sure they're correct. Next step's doing the 2 pieces. So for this, we're going to set our saw to 4.5 inches. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to push our 4 pieces through. We're going to have a 2-piece or a 2-slot on one side, 2-slot on the other side, but there'll be some leftover on it. We're going to have to nip it off. And again, you put that in your pile with your other little stumps. They're a little bit shorter than the other ones, but again, if you're making a fence or something like that around the little log cabin, they come in handy. Plus, if you're selling these, you can add them as pieces. Since most sets are sold by the piece, you can get a little bit more money by adding these in and having an extra 50 pieces that were just leftover wood anyhow. So I'll push this through. That'll give me 5 pieces. Once I get these done, I'll just flip the other side into it, cut it again, and I'll have 10 pieces out of 5 4s. You should now have 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. I'm going to make the roof pieces or the flat pieces next. Again, another piece of wood here. We want to make these the same length as our slots. So if you're going to make 3-piece roof slots, you want 7.5. If you're going to make 2-piece roof slats, you want 4.5. If you're going to actually make the 4-piece ones, 10.5. So whatever size you need, basically that's what we're going to cut this down to. So I've cut this board long enough I could plane it through one time. I'm going to make my long slots out of this, and I've got my bandsaw set up to 3/16 of an inch, since that's how thick our hole is. And I'm just going to push this through and catch as many as I can. I'm going to do the same thing for the smaller pieces. I'm only going to make 3 and 2 sizes. I'm not going to make any for the 4, since I'm not giving that many pieces of 4 out. Most people don't build roofs on the big 4 pieces. That becomes a porch piece or something like that. Now, as an option, what I like to do is I like to split some logs in half. These make perfect foundations, so you don't have a gap underneath of your little houses. This will be up to you how many you want to make of each one. You don't need as many, since you're just going to use them as foundation pieces or as roof stops. but you probably still want to have a few made. So up to you how many you want to make, but basically just split it right down the middle like that. After we're done with this, we're going to move on to the fun thing, making the gables. So the gables, you've got to kind of figure this out the first time you do it with a little bit of measurement. I did okay in geometry class. Probably trigonometry would come out a lot better, but I cut a couple pieces here just in triangles after I did some basic measurements first. So I got a basic of what I want to do here. My pieces are 7.5 inches wide, so I want to make the base 8 inches. I want that because I want to cut off those little sharp pieces at the end because I don't want sharp edges on there. What I did next, I took my flat pieces, put them on there, and laid out how many boards I wanted to go up there. So I want a total of 6 boards going across here. So I figured out 3/4 inches times 6, did the math, and I got my roof pitch there. So my pitch at the top is going to be about 30 degrees. So I've got a compound miter saw that cuts 60 degrees lucky for me, so I won't have to cut these on a bandsaw. Once you figure this out, you may have to bandsaw yours, handsaw them, jigsaw them, whatever you want. But as you can see, it's kind of a pain in the butt to get these pitches down the first time. Once you got them down the first time, it's a whole lot easier because all you've got to do is take one, lay it on your piece of wood, draw it out, and cut it out again. So I skipped around the video a little bit, but what you can see, this is my 2 pieces. I've made the board the height of my cut, set my saw to 60 degrees, and just went back and forth and cut it. After I did that, I went over to the table saw and cut out the 3/16 inch groove in here. Again, if you've got your saw set up with a dado stack in there, you can push it through one time. I'm just pushing it through and then setting a little pencil line on there. Once I get that done, again, I come back over here and I just nip the tips off of these. Now, this is if you're making them by hand. If you've only got like 4 or 6 of them to make, it's not so bad. If you've got 50 or 100 to make, this would take a really long time, even if you had them drawn out, or if you had your first one where you could sketch it out. So I've got mine loaded in the CNC machine and let the CNC do all the work for me. I'll show you that in just a second. Next, to figure out my roof pitch, it's about 25 degrees. I'm going to take an extra piece of log here, or block, and we're going to make the chimney out of it. I'm just going to transfer my roof pitch to the chimney pitch, throw it on the bandsaw, cut the little notch out of it, and then trim it down to whatever height I want. Now you can make this out of a different type of wood if you want to, just for looks. You can make a little thicker piece, thinner piece, however you want to do this. I'm doing this one quickly just to show you how to do it. It's not 100% perfect, but it's good enough for showing you what you need to do to get it done. Now, if you're fortunate enough to have a CNC machine, this is the easy way doing it. Plane my wood down to 3/4 of an inch, a little bit less than 3/4 because I want it to fit in there. I've got all my gables drawn up on there. Push a button and let it cut it out. Come back an hour later and all my gables are cut out the way I want them. So hopefully you figure out the gables. Like I said, if you're only making a couple of them, it's kind of hit and miss the first couple times you've done it. After you've done it a few times, it's not so bad. And what I'm doing now is I'm just taking some more 4 planks and I'm gonna make some 3s and 2s to keep my pieces from sliding off of my roof. So these will actually fit in the notches we made on the gable. So I want to make this as thick as the plank coming off the top. So I'm going to nip the little grooves off the other side and take a little bit of wood with it, because we only want this to be 3/16 of an inch thick after it sits down in the grooves. So just a quick test fit, we're going to drop that piece in and we're going to stick our boards on top and make any adjustments you have to with your bandsaw before you cut the rest of them out. And this should make your roof pitch nice and straight across and keep your boards from sliding off the end of it. Now there's different ways of doing this. You can use a thicker flat plank at the end. You can make little edges that catch the wood as it comes down. I try to avoid that because it creates little sharp edges. Try not to get any sharp pointy things around kids. That way nobody gets injured or hurt. And the pieces that are hanging over the edge, I'll take my sander when it's all said and done. All these pieces still need sanded and round those off to where they're not sharp and pointy anymore. So once again, take your pieces, lay it in there, test fit everything. If you need to sand the edges up a little bit, it's easier to sand your planks or run them back through a saw again. Let's say if you put your planks on here and it's hanging over too far at the top, what you can do is just go back to your table saw or your bandsaw, either one, and push them back through and take off a 1/16 of an inch or whatever you need. Or you might even be able to just run your sander down the side and take off enough to make them fit where they touch the top. If you're doing one set or two sets, again, a lot easier than making 50 sets and realizing that your board's are the wrong length. So I hit the chat GPT and things like that trying to figure out how many pieces were in original Lincoln log sets, and there's not really a set number of whichever piece there is. So I looked on Amazon, places like that. This is a 327 piece set at Walmart, and it's selling for $107. But as you can see in the picture, all those little benches and things like that could easily be made with your little leftover nubs and stubs from your cut pieces. Hope everyone enjoyed the video. Again, I apologize for the gable section. Not too good at showing you how to make gables. Hopefully you figured it out. If you would, please take your time, click on the like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below. See you on the next video.